I've been with the Fung Group for a bit over 10 years, and basically I got into sustainability looking at group risk. It's basically been really a slow kind of upswing in interest on sustainability, and now just over the past year and a half during COVID, it's almost like zoomed upward, and now sustainability is viewed both as a really critical business input and performance factor, but also as a major opportunity. And just as an example of that, if I look back 2 years ago, we were talking about energy efficiency, and we thought, okay, well, let's work on energy efficiency in factories. And we thought that an improvement of 10 to 25% of energy efficiency in a factory was really great. And now if you actually go to any investor or any brand talking about 10 to 25%, they wonder what planet you're coming from, because everyone's talking about net zero. How do you get to net zero? How do you get to the situation where you're talking about 80%? 80 to 90%, and then when you add renewables and so on, you really get to net zero. And so it began to be an exercise which we in the Fung Academy took over, about looking at how do our supply chains, how do our businesses respond to disruption overall. And that could be sustainability, technology, geopolitical, trade, any kind of major disruption which basically reshapes your global operating environment, reconfigures how you are competitive in terms of what makes you succeed. So if you're good in sustainability, but you don't look at trade and geopolitical, it doesn't fly. You have to look at everything dynamically interconnected. And so my role has evolved to looking at multiple types of disruptions and what capabilities we as a group are needing to build. And those capabilities, number one, how do you get, especially after COVID, how do you go digital? How do you And by going digital, it's not just the digitization of certain processes, it's actually the route to become a data and services company. So we're making products, but we're also capturing data along the way, and that data can give us insight into markets, people, consumption, and so it's really about data capture and what you really do with that. The second capability is sustainability, and that's about always responding, always looking out to the horizon about what opportunities and what risks are coming down the line in terms of social and environmental issues. And the standards have been rising all along. So it's never to be content at the level of sustainability performance that you have achieved today. It's always about knowing that your real competitive advantage is always to be where others think they need to go, and to be able to really sort of believe in believe that your investments will begin to pay off, but probably sometime in the future. So it's always to know where that standard is going to rise and then to exceed it. And always to look, how are you using technology? How are you creating better data? How are you creating more data? How are you creating a stronger network? Because not just you, it's all of your supply chain. You're only as good as the weakest link in your supply chain. So how do you work with your partners to build up their sustainability performance? And then the third aspect is really organizational learning, because disruption, you never know what the disruption is going to be. We think that we've cited three major groups: sustainability, technology, and geopolitical and trade, but there could be others, right? So it's about how you understand the global operating environment and digest everything that's going on and begin to distill what is it that you as a business need to be paying attention to, and what should be your response. And that's all about organizational and learning, which will get you to what we're all seeking, which is resilience. Today, there's a real focus on the product. So it's really becoming experts at different products and at what you can do in the product to demonstrate kind of your brand DNA. or your commitment, or to bring the consumer something new that they can't actually get elsewhere. It's really about this term we have, the emotional connection and engagement with the consumer. So it's how do you share with the consumer things that might speak to them. And I think that's going to be something that really shifts, because the whole world has been for the past 4 decades, the whole world has been focused on the US and the European experience. So whatever the US and European consumers want, global supply chains operating everywhere are going to give it to them. Now, if we look out from now until like 2040, the majority of consumption growth is going to be based in Asia. So we're talking China, ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and then eventually India. And those consumers, they think very differently. And that consumer ethos and what they're actually paying attention to is going to evolve over time. Right now they're at one stage in their development, and then once they get to another stage, their interests might change. And so we're going to have this wave where brands and retailers are going to have to be responding to different kind of interest points, consumer habits, shopping habits. The percentage of mobile consumption is like off the charts in Asia compared to where it is in the West and the US. And I think that's all going to put new demands on supply chains to really learn faster. So in the past, you had to have a really good tactic, a really good methodology, a really good product, and then you just churn the volume. And that's how you make your money. Today, it's about how fast can you change? Because your product today, your competitiveness today isn't going to be what carries you forward to be able to win in the market tomorrow. So yes, sustainability is important, and today there's a lot of attention on disclosure, disclosure as a company, social performance, environmental performance, being net zero, and so on. But those factors might change. So you need to master those, but then not be content. You need to really see, okay, what's next? And what's next might be circular. So now every brand has to have a circular story. Every brand has to have a net zero story. Every brand needs to have a people story, and maybe it'll be linked to people, diversity, and inclusion story. We don't know, but we've got to invest as if to pave those bridges in the future, so that whatever any brand wants, I mean, for us, we serve, hundreds of brands. So whatever any brand wants, we can deliver it with the data, the traceability, with the assurance, and with always the opportunity that they can actually be one step ahead. If we just think about COVID could have destroyed sustainability. Okay, because COVID basically made markets very cash conscious, like money conscious, and you had to really shrink back to the core of your operations. And what that could have meant for sustainability, which is always perceived as an added cost, because you got to invest first and then you gain it back. But it could have destroyed our sustainability programs, because suddenly innovation became nice to have, but if your revenues are falling 30 to 50%, then your concerns shift. But I think what COVID did is to really accelerate the global conversation because of the focus on people, health, environment, and also with the new attention on climate. And it's just that a lot of initiatives like around TCFD, the reporting initiative, those came to a head suddenly. It just like they had been working 5-7 years, but suddenly, their results began to show during this COVID period. And so a lot of those factors came together, and now our conversation really has shifted. It's about how do you get to net zero? What are you going to demonstrate in 2030? And how are you going to invest? How are you going to respond to the fact that, trillions of dollars of assets, double-digit percentage of all global assets under management are going to shift and require some ESG marker. Been performing on a very incremental scale, and now suddenly we need to go exponential. I would say the one group which has yet to really make its voice heard in Asia is consumers. Okay, and we see that in Hong Kong. I mean, the whole conversation around waste charging has been so, I don't want to be critical, but it's been so sluggish because consumers, it's an absent issue for them. It's just not part of their daily routine. And in the same way as it is in the US especially, and in Europe, where the conversations around waste and brands doing good has really been driven by consumers. In Asia, it's a different dynamic. And so I think there's got to be a lot more public education. And companies play a role in that. It's not just the government sort of educating people from day one. It's that companies have a choice. We can choice edit, and we can choose to bring along the consumer in ways that are very beneficial for them, as well as for the planet, as well as, for the community. So I think, businesses have to have confidence that the consumer will move. I don't think any consumer wakes up and says, okay, I'm going to be really wasteful today. It's just that it's not part of their daily consciousness. But that's also a generational thing. So I think now, if you're a company that has a consumer-facing presence in Asia, now's the time to get everything lined up and to begin to make those attempts to lead the consumer to a better decision. I mean, it's a thrilling point for us who have been sort of struggling to make that message heard. It's now I don't want to say finally, but it's now that this is now one joined up conversation. It's a big opportunity for Hong Kong. If we get it right, we can continue to be the domineering center for trade, sustainability, finance, and that's our future. That's our economic future. In Asia, the government, as a regulator, has always been a really strong force. It's how business has attended to issues, and I think China obviously has been the leader there. China's announcement of net zero by 2060 precipitated basically the announcements from Hong Kong, Japan, and Korea. And it may have been that all three economies were planning their own, pathways. But the fact that China announced it in such a public way really, I think, accelerated their commitment. And with China, Japan, and Korea being the major investors in the rest of Southeast Asia, where they go, the rest of the region will go. So I think it's just a matter of time before it becomes a real region-wide movement. And because the government has taken such a leading role, investors are also seeing, okay, now that government has sort of staked out its place, the value of my investments and the value of my portfolios are going to change because regulation is going to change. And so that becomes a conversation for investors to take up. So that brought the conversation into the world of investment, and that brings the conversation in the world of ordinary corporations, because they've got to respond to their shareholders, and because investors drive the conversation around disclosure. There will always be people who go first, right? And so if you're a brand that wants to, that really sees sustainability as part of your DNA and as part of your, the question, why are you here? If sustainability is a part of that and leaving the earth and the community as better off than when you arrive, then now is the time to take your stand and say, okay, well, I'm going to be part of the better change. I'm not going to be the one drag kicking and screaming into the future, because that's just not my DNA. My DNA is forward. And I think, we have every opportunity in Hong Kong. We have the entire Greater Bay Area. We have the entire consumer movement that's going to happen, or that's already happening in China and Southeast Asia. And they are looking for leadership, and we have that knowledge. We control supply chains all over the region. And so why wouldn't we take that leadership role? We can't be short-sighted about this. This is about our regions creating a new development paradigm. We need to say, how do we develop and become wealthy without destroying the planet? The only region in the world who can demonstrate that is us, right? Demonstrate that pathway. And so, I mean, what a steep challenge, but like what a great challenge to have. The idea of interpreting sustainability is a really interesting one for us to take up because, you know, we've grown up thinking that, okay, sustainability is about the 7 aspects that are on the Higg, you know, land usage, water, waste, energy, and so on. And I think actually Asia has the chance to say, okay, what about community? Right? If a product comes from a community, but has a higher carbon footprint, you know, as a product than something shipped from Brazil, the product itself, not including the shipping, then is that product better, or is the one from Brazil better? Okay, so, and I mean, I think I think that definition of what constitutes a sustainable product is going to shift over time, and that community-based, indigenous-based, if it preserves indigenous knowledge, is that worth something? How do we quantify that? Because there's a lot of, you know, like in India or even around Southeast Asia, that indigenous knowledge has value. Okay, but right now, we don't actually give it anything monetary. It's just there. Now, over time, we have to develop ways to treasure that. And the conversation about biodiversity is all about that as well. We have imperfect means to understand all of the different kinds of values that are going to be in the term sustainability. So today, yeah, we have one metric. But, you know, like going back to this idea of organizational learning, you're going to have to create and you're going to have to understand that that's going to shift over time. And I think companies, we just have to be on the lookout for sources of value, things that we treasure in Asia that we want to preserve. And those have to be valued in some way by the market. We're not there yet. We haven't even begun that conversation, but that's one of our opportunities because we're still developing, and those sources of indigenous knowledge, we still appreciate them, but just not in a very market-oriented way. Yeah, we have the opportunity to grow as the investment dollar shifts to ESG positive assets. And definitely that's what the finance industry today is looking at as a business opportunity, is that they want to intermediate that flow of finance, which is fine because that flow of finance is going to take place. Why shouldn't we intermediate? We're the best, right? But we also want to be leading the global conversation around sustainability. And I think the conversations around biodiversity, indigenous knowledge, different kinds of value, that's a conversation we can lead as well because we're here, we're where it's at. First of all, I think ReThink is, I don't want to say ahead of its time, but that it's here totally at the right time to facilitate that joined up conversation. And I think that platforms like ReThink, and I say platform because it's a continuing conversation, and we have it's not just like the event happens and then we sort of go back, but it's a platform for joining up that conversation on a continuous basis. And I think one of the things that I would like to kind of share at ReThink is how companies who have traditionally taken sustainability as kind of a discrete business risk and a discrete business opportunity in given ways, how we can really shift that to begin seeing sustainability as really part of our core competitive advantage, and what that means for how we build that competitive advantage going forward. And something that we're working very hard on is finance. You know, there's always been a real investment gap between the finance that's available to small and medium-sized enterprises and the finance that's available to MNCs. Every bank wants to lend to big, you know, to the H&M or to the Nike. They're really safe bets. But today in Asia, actually most of the jobs are created by the small and medium-sized enterprises. Firms with less than 2,000 employees, less than $20 million in revenue, probably even less. Except that they don't have good credit records, they don't have assets, their balance sheet is weak, so traditionally they're shut out of finance. And yet they create most of the jobs and they carry so much of our region's potential. Can we unlock their potential using the flow of finance, using sustainability as a potential upgrade, using digitization and the promise that that offers as a potential point of upgrade. So I think, you know, we as a region, we have to unlock that role of finance, investment finance and trade finance, in order to really move on sustainability. And so, and that's also our opportunity. It's our challenge, but it's also our opportunity, because if we can do that, we unlock the power of sustainability, we keep our role in global trade, and we unlock the power of all the SMEs who are like struggling in growth all over the region. And that's a competitive advantage that goes to Hong Kong, and that helps us keep our advantage as kind of the oiler of trade around Asia. And I think that's going to be really, really promising for Hong Kong. So in terms of the opportunity, sustainability it's without a doubt, it's a big opportunity. Sustainable products, sustainable finance, sustainable investment. But there are all of these other opportunities kind of also in the midst, which if we recognize them, then, you know, that's our future. Is that there's a lot of news now about reporting standards, you know, about what you have to disclose. I would say that the reporting, the public conversation is important, but don't shape your strategy around what you have to report. You know, reporting's different. Communication's different than operations. Okay, drive it by operations. Okay, and really seek to make that kind of permanent, lasting change in your operations, because that'll keep, you know, your 2 feet really solidly on the ground, and not and lower the risk that you may be accused of being engaged in hot air. Okay. The second thing is that we often struggle, and I mean, me as a sustainability person, you know, I have, you know, if we could only do this product, if we could only get this win, if we could only use, you know, this technology, that would be great, because like from a sustainability perspective, it would be a big step forward. But, you know, those single victories, celebrate them, but then you're not done. Okay, that's like, it's just one product. Except that you've got to green your whole portfolio. You've got to figure out which products aren't even going to be needed in 5 years' time or in 3 years' time. You've got to figure out which of your business lines needs its model revamp. So yeah, celebrate all of those wins, but then don't stop there. Always, you know, it's about being ambitious, it's about being hungry, and it's about understanding that this is really about your entire character. Our objective is to really be, how are we pushing the industry forward? How are we pushing our knowledge forward? And how are we sharing that back with the community? Because, I mean, if it's just us going forward, it's kind of, I mean, it's nice, but it's a bit meaningless, because then we're not playing that market moving role. So it's about innovating, really working hard, getting that challenge, and then share back. Because, you know, what we want, you know, for us to create the sustainable economy, everybody's got to participate. And so that means that we've got to share what we know, and to basically help lift the floor for everybody. It's not about us being the only green company. It's about everybody being more green. And not just green, obviously, it's about social and so on. But it's really about us as a society. Who do we want to be? And, you know, we as a company, we're playing a part in that conversation, but it's very, you know, we've got to make sure that it's very joined up. A, learn faster. B, implement faster. Just, it's not just about the knowledge, it's actually about what you do. And so I think that's part of, you know, what we learn in innovation process, is that, you know, from a scientific point of view, the innovation experts are always saying they're looking for that like silver bullet. You know, what's going to be my great innovation, my great idea? And we, you know, brainstorm, you know, add on. For me, it's all about, yeah, you can have 10 great ideas. The one I want to hear about is the one that you're going to implement. So I think that's our challenge for sustainability, is that we have so many needs, so many demands, so many opportunities. Tell me about the one you're going to implement. And I mean, that's what I want. That's what I want to support others to do.